The wind howled through the cemetery that night. Not the kind that chills your skin, but the kind that feels like it is trying to say something. Like it is carrying voices that were never meant to be heard. Rain fell in heavy sheets, striking the ground with a force that blurred everything into motion. Black umbrellas bending under pressure, polished shoes sinking into wet soil. Faces turning away from one another as if no one wanted to stay longer than necessary. And as the coffin was lowered into the ground, Elias did not look at it. He kept his eyes fixed on a man standing across from him, a man who was crying loudly, perfectly like a performance meant to be believed. Elias Carter, 34, stood still as the storm wrapped around him, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets, his jaw locked tight, feeling a strange weight in the air, like something unseen had shifted and everyone else had agreed not to notice. His brother Daniel was being buried in a closed casket after what everyone called a sudden accident. Yet Elias felt no tears, only a quiet certainty that something was wrong. As the coffin touched the ground, an old woman suddenly grabbed his wrist, her grip stronger than it should have been, her voice cutting through the storm as she whispered that the man in the grave was not his brother, pressing a folded paper into his hand before disappearing into the rain, leaving Elias frozen with a message that told him not to go home and not to trust the man who cried the loudest. And for the first time that night, the storm did not feel like weather. It felt like a warning. Before that moment, life had seemed normal in the way that hides its cracks behind routine and familiarity. Elias had always been the quiet observer, the one who noticed what others ignored, while Daniel was bold and magnetic, the kind of man who turned ideas into reality and people into believers. Together they had built something that looked balanced from the outside, but underneath it had always been uneven. Daniel moving faster than the world around him, and Elias trying to keep up, without fully understanding where they were going. Daniel's company had grown rapidly, pulling in contracts that didn't make sense, attracting attention from people who did not usually take risks on new names. Elias had asked questions, careful ones at first, then sharper ones when the answers stopped coming. Daniel would smile every time, brushing it off, telling him not everything needed to be understood to be trusted. And for a while, Elias accepted that, because success has a way of silencing doubt, especially when it belongs to someone you trust. Then Victor Hale entered their lives, and everything changed in ways that were almost invisible at first. Victor was calm, controlled, precise in everything he said and did, a man who never raised his voice and never seemed unsure. And that was exactly what unsettled Elias. Daniel trusted him instantly, as if Victor had been part of the plan all along. And from that moment on, things moved even faster. Deals closing overnight, new opportunities appearing out of nowhere, and Daniel becoming harder to reach, harder to read, as if he was being pulled into something he couldn't step away from. The late nights became normal, the unanswered calls stopped being unusual, and the explanations became shorter until they disappeared completely, replaced by silence that felt heavier every time it stretched between them. The night everything shifted. Daniel called Elias at 2:17 in the morning, and even before Elias answered, he knew something was different. Daniel's voice carried urgency, not fear, but something sharper, something that sounded like a realization that had come too late. He told Elias that if anything happened, he should not believe what anyone said, that things were not what they seemed, that people were not who they claimed to be. Elias tried to ask questions, but Daniel did not answer them directly, instead leaving fragments behind, pieces that did not form a complete picture, but felt important enough to remember. The call ended abruptly, cutting off mid-sentence, leaving a silence that lingered longer than it should have. By morning, Daniel was gone, the accident reported as clean, immediate, unquestionable. A story that required no investigation and invited no doubt. Everyone accepted it. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives, all repeating the same words with the same certainty. But Elias could not, because something inside him refused to settle, refused to accept an ending that felt too complete to be real. Sitting in his car after the funeral, the rain still falling like static noise against the windshield, Elias unfolded the paper the old woman had given him and found a single instruction pointing him to a storage locker at 11 that night. No explanation, no name, just a direction that felt less like a choice and more like a path he had already stepped onto. At the same time, his phone buzzed with a message from Victor asking him to come talk, a request that sounded polite but carried an edge that Elias could not ignore. And for a brief moment, he considered going, considered facing everything directly, but something held him back, something quiet and instinctive that told him the truth was not waiting there. Instead, he drove to the edge of the city where East Point storage stood under broken lights and long shadows, a place that looked forgotten but not abandoned, as if it existed just outside the reach of attention. He parked at a distance, watching, waiting, letting the silence settle around him before stepping out into the cold air. Locker 27 was at the far end, the metal door slightly worn, the lock already open as if someone had expected him to arrive. Inside, he found a duffel bag, a laptop, and a photograph that immediately felt wrong, showing Daniel and Victor from years earlier, but with a difference that Elias could not ignore. Daniel looked younger, less guarded, while Victor stood beside him not as a partner, but as an observer. His expression unreadable, his eyes focused not on the camera, but on Daniel himself, like he was studying him even then. The laptop powered on without resistance, revealing a single file that seemed to carry the weight of everything Elias had been trying to understand. When he opened it, Daniel appeared on the screen, alive but changed, his face carrying a tension that could not be hidden, his voice steady but heavy as he explained that Victor was not just a business partner, but the center of something far more dangerous, something that used the company as a front for operations that were never meant to be seen. Daniel admitted that he had not known at first, that the truth had revealed itself slowly, piece by piece, until it was too late to step away without consequences. He spoke about trying to leave, about realizing that the system he was part of did not allow exits, only silence, and as he continued, the reality of what had happened began to settle into Elias with a clarity that felt almost suffocating. Daniel warned that they would make his death look like an accident, that they always did, that everything would be arranged in a way that removed questions before they could form. And as the video glitched briefly, the fear beneath his calm became visible for just a second before disappearing again. He told Elias that there was evidence, enough to expose everything, but that it had to be used carefully because not everyone could be trusted, not even the systems meant to protect the truth. When the video ended, the silence in the storage unit felt heavier than before, like the air itself had changed, and as Elias opened the duffel bag and saw the documents inside, the names, the transactions, the connections all leading back to Victor, he understood that this was not just a personal betrayal. It was something larger, something structured and deliberate, driven by a need for answers that he could no longer ignore. Elias went to Victor's house that same night, stepping into a space that felt controlled down to the smallest detail, where nothing seemed out of place and everything seemed exactly as it should be. Victor was waiting, calm as ever, his expression unchanged as if none of this was unexpected, and their conversation unfolded slowly, each word revealing more than it seemed on the surface. When Elias said he knew the truth, Victor did not deny it, did not react with fear or anger, but with a quiet acknowledgement that felt more unsettling than any denial could have been. He spoke about Daniel not as a brother or a partner, but as a risk, a problem that needed to be resolved, and in that moment, Elias saw the full extent of what he was facing. Victor warned him that exposing the truth would not end with him, that it would reach further, pulling down structures that Elias did not yet understand, and that the consequences would not be limited to one man's downfall, but would spread in ways that could not be controlled. As Elias left the house, he realized that this was no longer about proving what had happened. It was about deciding what to do with it, about understanding that truth alone was not enough to bring justice in a world where power shaped outcomes. In the days that followed, nothing changed on the surface, the world continuing as if Daniel's death had been just another event, quickly absorbed and forgotten, while Victor remained untouched, his life moving forward without interruption. Elias stayed silent, but his silence was not passive, it was deliberate. A shift from reacting to observing, from searching for answers to understanding the system that had hidden them. He studied the evidence, traced the connections, learned the patterns, realizing that timing and strategy mattered more than exposure alone. One night, sitting alone with the city lights stretching endlessly before him, Elias reopened the video and watched Daniel again, hearing not just the warning but the choice within it, understanding that what he did next would define everything that followed, because the truth he held had the power to destroy, but also the power to consume. And as he sat there in the quiet, one question remained, steady and unavoidable. If you discovered something powerful enough to change everything, would you risk your life to reveal it? Or would you let it disappear into silence, just like the man they buried?